And then they came, they were on a train, and there were diamond dealers from Belgium. The diamond dealers, and they were all told, we are a group, you can't get off the train, any stop, nothing. You stay as a group, tour group. And the diamond dealers, somewhere along the line in Belgium, I don't know, wherever, got off the train and disappeared. So they were put like on a quarantine. They had guards, they couldn't leave. So when they got to Paris, Mom had told a friend of hers to meet her. She thought she'd just be waltzing to Paris, staying in a hotel, and she wanted to meet this boyfriend. And he couldn't get near her. There was police guard, and they took them from the train station to the hotel, and then from the hotel to the ship, and off to Palestine. They came to Palestine with British army people, and they had their horses. And you know, your grandmother and my mother, they loved horses. She said, at that time I was more interested still in horses than in men. So she said, I spent most of my time with the horses. However, at one point, she walked by a door, and there was a boy in bed, and he was having his bar mitzvah. He had the measles, but he was having the bar mitzvah. So she stood there at the door and watched this boy having bar mitzvah. And he later on became the assistant prosecutor for Eichmann. That boy, she said, I went to his bar mitzvah when Eichmann was on trial. She said, I know him. I was at his bar mitzvah. I said, wow. He was on the ship. Then Uncle Ernst and Uncle Gunter. So the family, Lisbeth and her family, Amu, Mom, and Apu were in Palestine. Ernst and Gunter were at Repton. And by the way, they learned all the prayers. Roger, all the Anglican prayers. When they came to visit Germany, their knees were all holy from kneeling so much, because it was a religious school. But anyway, they got passage to go to Palestine. So they were on a ship, and the Nazis were already in France, and the ship was out on the coast of Marseille, and the Nazis came aboard and wanted them off the ship. And the captain said, you're not touching my passengers. I'm in international waters. Scram, you're out of here. This is my ship. So thank God he stood his ground. He ended up in Egypt, and a man came. They were to be transported by train from Egypt
to Palestine.
So a man came with a fez, a Turkish guy with a fez. He was their guide. So he said to them, you have two choices. We can either get on the train to the border, or I can give you a tour of the pyramids. Well, what do you think they did? I need your passports. Uncle Ernst told me this story. So, okay, so he took their passports, and they didn't know where the passports went, but they knew they were in trouble. They thought, oh my gosh, we gave them the passports, what could happen to us? But they did a tour of the pyramids, and then he took them to the train station, and he picked up his fez, and the passports were right here, and he put them on the train. And of course, Amu and Apu didn't know what happened to them. All the people came, except for our uncles. Anyway, and that's how they ended up living in Haifa, in the house, which Amu and Apu already bought before they came. They had been here in 36 and
so
bought the house in
all the
Ahuzah.
family was actually in Haifa?
All of them in the same house in Haifa, except for Uncle Vernon, who was first in a camp for German undesirables. They sent many of the German Jews, and German prisoners of war to Canada or into Australia. Susanne did her research on that. Mom's friend from Essen. But anyway, so Uncle Vernon was there, and then he volunteered to join the British Army, and he became an interrogator, I think, because they used, and so did our Uncle Gephardt on our Goldschmidt side. They had to change their names. They joined the army, the British Army, and they became interrogators. And I think they got their, at least my Uncle Gephardt said, I got some justice. And I have their recollections because they wrote them. Uncle Vernon did, and my other uncle wrote them for Susanna's research, so we have their letters, which are fascinating. Then Vernon stayed in England. Amu was here. Apu came to America, was there on business, was supposed to return to Palestine. He was on the George Washington, the ship, and when they hit around Italy, the U.S. entered the war. The ship went back to pick up troops, and everybody went back to New York. So he never got to Palestine again. So he ended up in Ellis Island, which was because his visa expired, so they wouldn't let him into New York anymore. So Ellis Island was for people who, were stuck there, immigrants or people who had nobody to vouch for them, and sick people and so on. So he was there for several days, I think, till the Greenebaums, the cousins, through Hirschlands, bailed him out, vouched for him. And then he was here for in New York for 4 years, and Amu was in Israel. And we translated the letters for Mom's birthday, we gave them out. But basically, their letters between them and between their children, here and there, we only have the ones that they sent to Apu. I don't know what happened to his letters. They ended up in Cholev Street, but I don't know what happened. I don't know if she destroyed them. I don't know that they were destroyed, but we have their letters to Apu. And 4 years of letters trying to get Amu here, because he couldn't come, Amu to America. Let's try it through Baghdad. Let's try it through, who knows, India. India was one place. For 4 years they tried, and finally they got passage for Amu. Your grandfather did a lot of legal work to try to do it. Nothing worked, nothing worked. Finally, they got passage. She got on a ship, and then they stopped in Alexandria, I think, and then they went to Portugal, where there were friends there, and then to America. And her description of the ship is like you're taking a cruise. We had a lovely dinner. We did a little sightseeing in Alexandria. After 4 years of agony, she's talking like it was a little cruise she was taking. But she was very happy to be back together with Apu. And the picture in this book that Hannah put together is after she got here. It's the first year she was here, and they were on vacation in upstate New York, and that was a picture of the two of them.
And Irma came after?
Now, Gunter came. He came to visit them, and he wanted to stay. And then Uncle Ernst followed. And then, and that was in the early 50s. And then we came in 56.
My father came in 48 because he married my mother in 1950.
Right, and Uncle Ernst was in the early 50s, maybe 51, 52, because he still lived in Haifa. I remember we used to go visit him in the shoe store where he worked. And he was in the tank corps here, Uncle Ernst, in the war, But anyway, we came in 56 because Amu had a heart attack. She came every year to England to visit, and here, every year. And in 55, she had a major heart attack. And the doctor said to her, you cannot come here anymore. The weather isn't for you, blah, blah, blah. You want to see your children, you meet them in Switzerland. So after that, people went to visit her in England or Switzerland. But she had a heart attack. And our parents, my mother, wanted to be near her mother. And Apu had died already. He died in, I think, 53. So, and my father didn't care. My mother didn't like the Germans being in Egypt. Germans were in Egypt at the time. Not Germans, Russians were in Egypt. So she was a little worried about that. And she said, I've had enough of war. I want to go be with my parents. So Amu and Uncle Ernst and Gunter and Helen sponsored our family to come to America. And when we got there, and Hannah, you might remember, when we got there, they were all at the port, all of them. And Helen had a big lunch for us, I remember. And then they said, maybe you'd like to see where you're gonna live for a while, till you guys. And they had a complete apartment for us, all set up in the same, in Bayside, New York, around the corner from where they lived. And that was wonderful. So we would see these, Monica and Karen, well, Karen,
Monica.
later Monica,
Yeah,
but
later.
Karen, every day. She was a little kid, you know, she was 2, I think, right? About 2
That was,
or
yeah,
3.
2.
Anyway, so that's how, and then Dad got a job in Chicago, we moved to Chicago. So the American side of this family, because we all lived closer together, would see each other very often. You know, we went to New York to visit our grandmother, they came to us, they wanted to eat whatever they wanted,
Well, we
they
had-
came to Chicago.
We had ice cream in Labor Case, and then your mother got up and made us eat a real breakfast.
That's right.
Your
My
father
father
gave us
always
anything we
said,
wanted.
what do you want, girls, ice cream for breakfast? Sure, no problem.
She would eat ice